I get a lot of questions on which Sony camera is the best for beginners in terms of pictures and videos, so in today's video I got different kits for your particular needs. Let's go. And we'll start off with the photos, and the first camera I would still consider in 2025 is the Sony ZV-E10 Mark I, because it still has 24 megapixel sensor. It still has pretty nice image quality. It does have an old sensor with pretty big rolling shutter, but since it has the physical shutter, you don't have to rely on the electronic shutter, and the rolling shutter is not an issue in stills mode. In video, it's a different story, but for stills, it is still relevant in my opinion. And the price of it is $850 new, but you can find in good conditions used camera for I guess about $500 or even $400. Unfortunately, it does have a pretty small battery, and the battery life actually sucks. It's also not having a viewfinder, only the LCD screen, which can be a bummer for some people. Also, it lacks in-body image stabilization. It has only one SD card slot, but most of the cameras that I'll be talking about in this video, they only have one SD card slot because they are not super professional cameras, more like the entry cameras or beginner cameras. And the autofocus on the ZV-E10 Mark I is not the best in the business as for now, but it's still pretty much reliable. As far as the lenses go, I would not suggest picking something like the kit lens, like this 16 to 50 lens, because it's pretty soft and also pretty slow, dark, let me say. And I would much rather prefer something like Sigma 18 to 50 f2.8 because it's not super pricey. It's only $660, but you can find it with a discount for a really good price, or used for a really good price in good conditions. And the second lens I would suggest is this Viltrox 27mm f1.2. It's a pretty beefy lens. It's $550, not the cheapest one, but you'll get a super fast lens, f1.2. It's still very much sharp and clean at f1.2, and you'll have great image quality even in lower lighting situations. And I also did use this lens with the Sony Nex5, which is 14 years old, 14 megapixel camera, and still get this type of shots and those results. So even with a pretty old camera, this lens shows great performance. So I'm not even talking about the ZV-E10 Mark I. It'll be a great combo. But if you have a bigger budget and you want to have the latest and greatest gear in terms of photography gear, I would say that the Sony a6700 would be a much better choice because it has a newer sensor, 26 megapixel. It'll have much bigger battery, like 2.5 times more battery juice in this battery. And also you'll be having a viewfinder, you'll be having faster readout speeds, and more importantly, you'll be having the latest and greatest AI autofocus as well. And finally, a6700 has IBIS built in, so in-body image stabilization, which can be a very handy feature for a lot of photographers as well. I would say for the base lenses, I would still suggest the 18 to 50 from Sigma f2.8 and the Viltrox 1.2 27mm, but if you have the budget and you want to extend the range, I would suggest three pretty fast lenses. It's 11mm f1.8 either from Sony, which is actually pretty pricey, $700, or from Yongnuo, also 11 1.8. It's $300, and you'll have pretty similar performance between those two lenses in the photos department, let me say. And then I would suggest the Sigma 17 to 40 f1.8 constant aperture. It's a pricey lens, it's $920, but it covers a huge range, and in full frame equivalent you'll have about 25.5mm to 60mm, and the background blur and separation will be looking like an f2.8 on the full frame camera, so you get almost like a full frame look of a 24 to 70-ish lens f2.8 on your crop sensor camera like the Sony a6700 or the ZV-E10 Mark I. And finally, I would pick the telephoto lens, which is the Sirui, or Sirui, as many of you might read this name, but it's Sirui 75mm f1.2, because it's pretty sharp wide open. It's super nice in terms of the look. It's very nice for the talking headshots and portraits especially. And it's not that heavy and expensive. It's only $320, and I think this big range from 11mm to 75mm, all pretty fast lenses, at least f1.8 on crop sensor cameras, it'll give you a huge variety and pretty nice performance, because you'll still be having lower ISO values or shorter shutter speeds because of the fast apertures, and the look you'll get from those lenses will be very nice. So here is the price of a base kit with the ZV-E10, here is the price of the base kit of the a6700, and also on the screen right now you can see the price of the full kit that I've been talking about for each and every camera, so you can understand the pricing better. I took those numbers from B&H, and today I'm recording this video on 13th of August 2025, just so you know. As an alternative, I can also suggest a full-frame option, the Sony a7 III camera, which is not new, definitely. It's about 8 years old or maybe even 10 years old. I actually don't remember. I'll write it down right here. And also I can suggest the Tamron 28-75 f2.8 G2 lens, which is pretty nice and sharp. My wife uses Nikon 28-75, which is actually a rebuilt Tamron lens, let me say, and she's more than fine with this focal length. She doesn't have anything wider and she gets very nice results and amazing photos, to be honest. And one more lens I would suggest is the Yongnuo 85mm f1.8. It's a pretty cheap lens, it's around $345, whereas the Tamron 28-75 is $800. And I would say that those two lenses will cover all the needs, so you have a pretty fast prime 85 and you'll have a rather fast, let me say, 28-75 G2 lens, and you'll get very nice image quality as well, because A7 III still has 24 megapixels. It has pretty fast autofocus, not the latest and greatest, but still very reliable and fast autofocus, dual card slots, so you have the redundant backup. It has an EVF, the IBIS. So all in all, this camera for pictures is still very much relevant. Of course, it's not as fancy as the Sony a7 IV, for example, but still for this amount of cash, it'll be fine. So in terms of the price, let me say it's like $1,900. But actually, guys, used in good conditions, you can find it for less than $1,000, that's for sure. And speaking of lenses, I also really like the latest lineup from Viltrox, and those lenses are called Air, and they have the full-frame lenses and the APS-C lenses. For example, for full-frame, they have 20mm f2.8 lens and 50mm f2 lens, and also for APS-C, they have the 15mm f1.7, 25mm f1.7, and 56mm f1.7. All of those Air lenses are less than 200 grams and less than $240. Some of them are even cheaper than $200. So for a very small lens, sharp, compact, fast lens, I think it's a no-brainer, so you might consider those Viltrox Air lenses as well if you don't like my options that I've mentioned above. And the next category for the people who are not interested in photos completely and only interested in video, like myself, for example. And for those people, I would recommend the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II if you only do video, once again, because it's pretty much very affordable and still packed with a lot of great features. Compared to the Sony ZV-E10 Mark I, the ZV-E10 Mark II is much more feature-rich in terms of the video quality. It has 4K up to 60 frames per second in 10-bit, whereas the first generation only had 4K up to 30 frames per second and only in 8-bit. Also, the Mark II has much better rolling shutter performance and exactly the same sensor as in the Sony FX30, which is my second suggestion for the video side of things. But also the Mark II of the ZV-E10 has much better battery life, about 2 times better battery life. Also the AI autofocus, which is the best in class on the APS-C Sony cameras, and let me say APS-C cameras in general. But it still lacks the viewfinder, it still has one SD card slot, so no redundant backup recording, and it also has overheating if you record in 4K 60 for pretty long periods of time, so I would suggest purchasing an external cooler to resolve this issue. But also, guys, the ZV-E10 Mark II is not that good for photos because it doesn't have a physical shutter, so you can only use the electronic shutter. That is why for photos I would prefer the ZV-E10 Mark I or the A6700, and also this camera doesn't have a built-in IBIS, in-body image stabilization, and for this particular camera I would say that the Tamron 17-70mm VC f2.8 would be a better choice because it will have the internal VC vibration compensation mode enabled, whereas for the Sony FX30 I would not suggest the 17-70 VC from Tamron because it will have pretty weird performance with this in-camera's IBIS, and I would say that for the FX30 the Sigma 18-50 f2.8 would be a better choice because it has built-in IBIS and it won't have some issues with the VC of the Tamron. So this is the second camera I would suggest for video because it has dual card slots, so you'll have the redundant recording or backup. It also has a built-in cooling fan, so it won't overheat on you. It also has pretty much beefier construction, and all in all it's better weather sealed as well. It has IBIS, but guys, this camera has no AI module, so the autofocus would be slightly worse than on the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II, and this camera also doesn't have a physical shutter, so for the pictures I would still prefer the A6700 or even the Sony ZV-E10 Mark I. And as the main prime lens, I would still recommend the Viltrox 27mm f1.2 because it's great both for stills and for video, and you'll have a very redundant and nice solution for low light situations with both the FX30 and the ZV-E10 Mark II. But if you want to get better glass and you want to get wider focal length ranges, I would still recommend the same lenses as for the photos. This would be the 17 to 40 mm f1.8 from Sigma. The new one is pretty expensive, but still it's a great lens for all the APS-C cameras, especially from Sony. Then I would recommend the same Sony 11mm or the Yongnuo 11mm f1.8 lens, and then the Sirui 75mm f1.2 for talking headshots and some creative shots with telephoto ranges. And the final category, guys, is the hybrid shooters, both photos and videos, like 50 to 50%. So I would suggest the Sony a6700 because it's great for both videos and photos. It is priced at $1,500, and for the lenses I would still suggest the same lenses, Sigma 18 to 50 f2.8 and the Viltrox 27mm f1.2 for the basic kit, and then for the extended kit, for a more expensive kit, I would still suggest the same three lenses. It would be the Sigma 17 to 40 f1.8, the Sony or the Yongnuo 11mm f1.8 lens, and then the 75mm f1.2 by Sirui. And the total price of the maximum combo will be around $3,500. But also, guys, we have an alternative in the full frame department, so we can pick the Sony a7 IV for about $2,700, and then my favorite lens of all time for the full frame, Sony 20 to 70mm f4. It is great for video, it is less great for photos because you'll have to correct the distortion in the photo mode if you shoot RAW, but it's like one click in Lightroom. And also I would suggest the Sony 35mm f1.8 lens for full frame cameras for about $800, but you can find both of those lenses and camera cheaper, used in good conditions, and this combo will cost you about $4,700, which is not super expensive, but still more expensive, about $1,200 more expensive than the APS-C kit. But it'll be a nice kit for both photos and videos. And one more question, guys. Why do I suggest APS-C cameras and not full-frame cameras in general? Because I would say that with the fast glass that I've been recommending with f1.8 lenses, for example, or even f1.2 lenses, the full-frame look is achievable on the APS-C camera. Plus, it's more budget-friendly, and I would say that it's more important to know the limits of your APS-C camera, of your cheaper camera, and get the maximum results out of your cheaper camera. And then, with all of those knowledge and thoughts in mind, come to a more expensive solution. For example, if you know that you are only into photos and your a6700 is not worth it for you anymore and it doesn't give you the results that you want, maybe you want to go up higher for the A75R, for example, or A7CR, let me say. Or if you are into video and you want to get the best performance, you can come up to Sony FX3 Mark II when it comes out, for example. So this is my thought. Get the most out of your camera, which is cheaper, with cheaper glass and lenses, then get some better glass and lenses and get the best results out of those, and then get to more expensive solutions in your particular niche with all of the knowledge in mind. And guys, if you think that I didn't mention a lot of good lenses for APS-C and full-frame cameras, on my channel I have two huge guides for APS-C cameras and lenses and for the full-frame lenses, so I'll leave those in the description below so you can watch them afterwards to make sure that you have the best choice for your particular needs. And right here, guys, I have my APS-C lens guide for Sony cameras, because I was actually talking about using APS-C camera as your first camera as a beginner. So I'll see you in that video, guys. And if you did enjoy this one, smash the like and subscribe buttons and hit the notifications bell. Take care. Bye.